I just realized my mic had not unmuted my mic, so we're going to go ahead and get started right now. Welcome everyone to today's small business webinar. My name is Paul LaChapelle. I'm with Montana State University, and I'm happy to welcome you all to today's webinar. We are recording the webinar, and we'll be posting it to the archive to our website. You can find that website link in the chat box, and you can find the chat box in the lower right corner of your screen there on the WebEx platform. Should have an arrow that you can click on to see that information. If you have any tech support questions, feel free to either call or email, and I'm happy to walk you through any questions that you might have. Today's webinar is sponsored by Montana State University Extension Community Development, the Montana Economic Developers Association, the Small Business Development Centers, which are affiliated with the Montana Department of Commerce, and the U.S. Small Business Administration. Additional support from the Great Falls Development Authority and the University of Montana. You will have an opportunity to ask questions throughout this presentation. Feel free to type those into that chat box. I'll be monitoring those, and we'll relay those on to our presenter. So now it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenter. Barnett Sporkin-Morrison is the director of the Food and Ag Development Center in Great Falls, associated with the Great Falls Development Authority. So thanks for joining us today, and take it away.
Yeah, no, thank you. I guess I'd begin by just asking where everybody's from. I'm assuming people from different parts here in Montana, or maybe outside of Montana as well.
Great, so we'll encourage folks to type those in, and I'll read those back to you, Burnett, as folks are typing those in.
Okay. Well, as Paul said, I work as the director of the Food and Ag Development Center with the Great Falls Development Authority. Tell you a little bit about the Food and Ag Development Center program. That is a program that's a grant program through the Montana Department of Agriculture, and there's actually 8 centers across the state. I straddle my time within the Great Falls Development Authority, working both on business retention and expansion, business and industry recruitment, as well as developing an entrepreneurial ecosystem, which includes close collaboration with my Small Business Development Center colleagues, our Vice President and Regional SBDC Director, Jason Nitschke, and then Rich Gannon, who's a rural business advisor that focuses mainly on the rural counties of Teton County, where I actually live. I'm reporting live from my house in Choteau, and Rich is up in Cut Bank, and he covers Teton, Pend Oreille, Glacier, and Toole County. So some of you may know we collaborated within GFDA to put out a business crisis toolkit back on the 20th of March. And knowing that this is almost 1 month later, as we're kind of knee deep in this pandemic downturn, we found it need to start providing some additional resources to business. And one of them was a business hibernation toolkit that we have available through our website that we launched last week. And if you're tuning into this webinar today, it might be that you read through our crisis toolkit, in which we called people to really start focusing on the cash positions in their business, to focus on cash flow, try to reduce or delay costs when possible, and really separate themselves out from their business and see how healthy it was. And that separating oneself from their business is kind of the mentality that airline pilots get us in when we're getting ready to take flight, in which they remind you that you need to put on your own oxygen mask first before you put on the oxygen masks of others. And so really seeing your business differently, you might have gotten to this point in time and said, hey, you know, I've done everything I can to try to decrease my costs. I have tried to manage my cash flow as much as possible, but I'm recognizing that if I continue to operate my business, even if it maybe have been classified as an essential business by the governor's orders, that you may say, hey, you know, I'm just going to keep hemorrhaging cash, and by the time we get through this, I'm not going to be much stronger than I am now. And that might have led you to start thinking about hibernating, or essentially pushing the pause button on your business. I want to talk a little bit about just this concept of hibernation. As being somebody that spent my first few years of my life without the internet, I still know how to use a dictionary and still have a copy of the second college edition of American Heritage Dictionary that I inherited when I left high school. And so I made a point of looking up the word hibernate as well. Then, based upon looking at the definition of hibernate, it led me back to winter. And as you can see, hibernation is really the definition of that is to pass the winter in a dormant or torpid state, or to be inactive or dormant for a period. And when we look at that definition of winter that I highlighted, the third one of those is a period of time characterized by coldness, misery, bareness, or death. And I don't want to, try to say that all those terms apply to the pandemic downturn that we're currently seeing. But the grim reality, and I say this as an economist, the grim reality of economic downturns is it doesn't mean that everybody walks away unaffected. And the amount of abrupt and immediate decreases in consumer demand, which has had ripple effects across supply chains, as well as just societal issues that we're facing today and economically, and both on the economic and social side, things have changed dramatically, and it is affecting businesses. And the idea of hibernation that we want people to get in their mindset is, how is it that you can weather all this and come out after all this either stronger or understanding your business better, and really being able to push your business forward. So I'm going to walk you through a few different concepts that we have within our toolkit that we're suggesting business owners follow. And I want to keep in the back of your head that really the goal of all this is to allow you to do some necessary things to shut your business off and understand how to turn it back on, but then to rise up to 20,000 feet above your business, separate yourself out of it, and really start looking at it with a new set of eyes, to remember why you're in business, to remember things about yourself, and really understand whether your business is as strong as it is, and whether or not you can take this opportunity to really improve your business. So I'll walk you through initially talking to what we call our bail team, then talk to you a little bit about mapping your productive assets, and then addressing your supply and demand sides, and then finally that 20,000 foot level of self-reflection and forward planning. So building on what we've already said within our other crisis toolkit, we're really trying to focus people on to remember to reach out to their bail team. And if you haven't heard that acronym before, we use that in GFDA, especially our Small Business Development Center, to refer to bankers, accountants, insurance agents, and lawyers. And it may be the case that some businesses haven't built this team, but now is the opportunity to try to start building it. And if you have built this team, now is the time to recognize that this is your bail. This is the group that can help give you necessary and accurate information that help you move forward from here. If you haven't already talked to your bankers and you're concerned about cash flow or what you're going to do, now is most definitely the time to talk to them. They should have a rich amount of advice for you, especially during this downturn. Their interest is to make sure that you continue to be bankable, and they are individuals that are important in answering questions that you might have in regards to federal government programs, whether it's EIDL loans, PPP program. The second group is your accountants, which could be internal to your organization or they could be external. And you need to have conversations with them to make sure you understand what is needed to ensure managing the ongoing financial obligations of your business, and really get a solid picture of your balance sheet and your physical and financial assets. And one thing to really drive home with your accountants, maybe now, but also into the future, is to really get them to understand that your interest as a business owner is not always trying to decrease your tax base. Your interest is driving profitability and ensuring you have cash on hand now and in the future. Again, it does not always, one of the difference between accountants and economists and others is the reality is this: if you focus always on decreasing your taxes over the years, that does not always equate for profitability, and it does not always equate to having cash on hand. So this is your time to work with your accountant to understand how it is you can keep cash on hand. Third group of that is your insurance agents. Now, some of you could be annoyed at your insurance agent once you recognize that this pandemic is not really covered by your insurance. But even if that's the case, your insurance agents still are very important. As you look to turn off your business or hibernate it, you need to make sure that your risks are still covered. And there may be a way that an insurance agent can adjust your coverage to decrease your costs, but to make sure you still come out all right. And that final group is your lawyers, which you may have some lawyers in-house, or you may be working with other lawyers as well. And those lawyers can give you quite a bit of information, whether it's dealing with your employees, or maybe you have supply and demand contracts that you need to figure out how you're going to handle those if you're going into hibernation. There may be issues on leases of your buildings and things of that nature. So again, that bail team is your bankers, accountants, insurance agents, and lawyers, as well as anybody else that is a trusted business advisor. Now is the time to reach out to that team and talk to them about what you're thinking about doing or what you're in the process of doing. So once you've really started to reach out to that bail team, one of the things that we suggest doing is doing an exercise of essentially mapping your productive assets. And this may sound slightly academic, but at the reality, it's just a basic look at your business. It's to ask yourself, what are those basic things that enable you to produce the goods and services you sell to people? So as an economist, we usually put this into a definition of a production function, that these things enable you to produce something. And at the very basic level, it's good to look at what your physical assets are. These are such as your land that you might have, buildings, machinery, even computers you can touch and feel that actually are part of your business that you use to do something. Another big grouping of this is human capital. These are your employees. This includes yourself. This includes your business team, even potentially that bail team I talked about. And finally, the third main grouping is your financial assets. And I would also incorporate in this mapping out what your liabilities are. This includes your bank accounts, your lines of credit, your short and long-term debt, and your accounts receivable. And within this is to start mapping out and actually listing those things. So if you have a building, list that you have a building. If you have a piece of machinery, list that you have a piece of machinery. And start to think through what is needed to actually turn those things off. What is needed to hibernate each one of those asset groupings and then the individual items under them. Now, as you begin to work on how you hibernate those things that we can say are productive assets, it's very important to keep a list of everything you're doing. And you may ask why you would want to do that. And the reality is that imagine if you had a machine that was vital to your own survival and you had to turn it off. And there was a whole list of things you had to do to turn it off. And again, if it's vital to your survival, you need to know how it is you turn that thing back on. And so I would suggest, as you look at these different assets you have and what you need to do to put them offline, essentially, is to figure out to make sure that you record that information every step you're taking. Maybe put it in an Excel spreadsheet, maybe just in a quadrangle notebook or just a simple piece of paper. Write it down, and that helps you understand everything you need to do to bring stuff up. Because you may be in this phase of hibernating your business just for 2 weeks, or it may be 6 weeks from now, and you might be at home now educating your kids, trying to deal with social distancing, and forget a thing or two if you don't write it down. To give you an example of things that you're going to have to do as you bring a business back up, is if you do take an option of adjusting your insurance coverage to accommodate your business hibernation mode, you will need to readjust that again before you start business up again to make sure you have proper coverage. I mean, if you're in the case of shutting down a restaurant, you need to think through and have an itemized list coming out of this of what you need to open it back up. The question is, will you need to be doing a deep clean? You have to have the county sanitarian come by because new rules and regulations will be put in. And when do you really need to restock food and start doing things? The idea of this, again, is that if you were in a big building and you had to get out of this building at night and make sure all the lights are off, that you don't want to turn off lights that leave you in the dark. And again, if you want to turn on all those lights, you want to make sure that you're always getting it into a room without having to travel in the dark. And this is the concept really behind really trying to record what you're doing as you shut things down and then what you need to bring them back up. Now, having gone through essentially that basic mapping of something, mapping of your assets, it's a good idea to then to begin to directly address your suppliers and your customers. And that begins combined in with looking to do with shutting down essentially your operation or your assets, how it is you can shut down things with your suppliers and customers and how to bring them back up. So have a bit in your mindset of having discovery mode, being in discovery mode to learn what you need to do when you work with your suppliers and customers. For instance, with suppliers, how long of a lead time will you need with your suppliers to get things going again? Will order size, product availability, and logistics times change? Will payment terms change? And then on customer side, what will it take to start supplying customers again? When will you need to turn things back on? Will it be 2 days before sales, 3 weeks? Do you need to bring, workers in before you bring a sales staff in? What will need to be done to get word to customers you are back and open for business? If you just open your doors one day, most likely they're not going to flood back in. You may have to have a marketing plan to try to get people back in and start that marketing before you actually open your doors so you actually have customers in to buy your product. So specifically moving into addressing your side, what was your supply and your demand sides. Suggestion is really to start with your supply side. And the first step with that is to identify your key suppliers, your service providers, and your providers of your physical assets, all the people that you kind of work with to produce the products and services that you sell. And you want to then communicate your keys. And I'm going to express, it's kind of a 3-step process, is to get yourself in a specific mindset before communicating with them, to follow a course of action, and then do some careful reflection afterwards. And to give you an idea of the mindset on a supply side, this is really your opportunity to be transparent and real with your business contacts. Remember to be empathetic, because at the other side of your emails, your phone calls, your Zoom meetings, or a webinar, there's actually people. And given this time of social distancing, people do actually want to have a human connection. There's the good chance that many of the suppliers may be stressed and afraid, while others may be going through your same thought process about hibernating their business. While others may be doing fine, and they actually may be relieved that they don't have to still be focusing on trying to supply your business because everything is just going through the roof on, demand for their products. As you talk to them, though, you want to be able to find solutions now and for in the future, and you want to in the future. And so when you actually reach out to them, you want to communicate with each regarding your plans. You might want to consider time with them to discuss your business and how you can strengthen things in the moving forward. And you again want to always demonstrate empathy with them. And finally, that final stage of reflection is to sit back and ask yourself, after you've interacted with your suppliers, how things have changed with your suppliers. Will some of your suppliers themselves go out of business? Will they be changing their business model? Is there anybody you can work more with that you haven't worked before? And that's one of the things that I should have addressed, is that when we talk about these keys or these key suppliers, you want to identify them based upon who you do the most business with, who you trust, who you have the longest business with, who you see the most possible prospects with. Is go ahead and prioritize those in your own mind, on your own spreadsheet, and in your own notebook, and think more about these essentially key suppliers that you might have. Things got a little confused there. Moving on to the demand side, it's essentially the same. Is you want to identify in your mind who your key customers or key consumer clusters are. And so it may be that you're a service business that has 60 customers and you know the key ones, or maybe they all are. Or maybe you're a retail business that has certain consumer clusters, certain age groups or demographics or shopper types that you can see. And you want to figure out, again, how to communicate with, you need to communicate with those keys first by setting a specific mindset, by deciding what you're going to communicate with them, and then reflecting. And again, on that mindset is remembering to be empathetic, to remember that things are changing for consumers, and you have to recognize how they're changing, and you need to understand that as well. and you want to be able to find ways that you can connect with your consumers at a very human level now and moving forward. On the actual actions, it's going to depend upon the size and the type of your business, but you want to communicate honestly with your customers about your plans. Consider in some cases of requesting time with your customers to talk more about your business and ways that you can move forward with them. And again, you want to demonstrate empathy and invite others to essentially have transparency with you and your business and to understand how together you can move forward. Now, on that reflection side is you take this opportunity to interact with consumers or to put out, blog posts or Facebook profiles or radio ads or direct mail or actually just phone calls or writing to people. Take time to really reflect on what you're hearing. And it may be the case that you're going to see that some of your customers aren't going to be in business anymore. It may be certain demographic groups that have been your customers because of this economic downturn may not have the disposable income to continue to buy what you're selling. Regardless, is to reflect on these things and figure out whether or not how it is you need to move forward as a business. And one of the things that's important at this as a business is to do a little bit deeper reflection about your customer base and ask yourself whether you've been in a product or a consumer mindset with your business. And if you haven't been in a customer mindset with your business, now more than ever is the need to get into a customer mindset. And to give you an idea, a customer mindset is rooted in focusing on consumers and working backwards to design your business model to drive profitable unit economics over time. It's really the base of innovation. So really what it is figuring out there's people that are customers out there that want a product and then bringing that product to them versus just developing a product and then trying to push it on customers. And it's really focusing more about customer profitability, how customers benefit from doing business with you versus just selling them a product. So this is where I want to make a little just side conversation, well, not just a side point within all this is we've looked at, again, mapping out those assets, really understanding what you have and coming up with ways to turn them off, and then starting to create that map to turn them on again, and then communicating soundly with your supply and demand side and starting to look towards the future. While you're in hibernation mode, it is still absolutely important to maintain cash and cash flow and to ensure sound financial management. And so one of the suggestions we have is that as you work through your changing cash flow structure for the foreseeable future is to start utilizing a 13-week rolling cash flow in addition to a weekly cash flow. And the link on this slide is to the Food Finance Institute that's at the University of Wisconsin. And they have put together a very usable spreadsheet. They have some written guidance and even a video that can walk you through how to use this, but continue to ensure financial management. And as you do that, it's important to reflect a little bit on your finance and ask yourself some basic questions. These include of how sound was your business before the pandemic downturn, and really be honest with yourself about that. If your business was producing sound cash flow, how do you return to that? And if your business wasn't producing sound cash flow, how is it you can work during this hibernation period to reverse that course? And really ask yourself if you were really focused in driving profitability before the downturn, as well as ask yourself if you really understand who your customers are or were, to once again to revisit, to ask yourself whether or not you've been in a customer mindset this whole time. Now, again, after you've turned all these things off and done some of that work, it's important to go up even more or a little bit higher of your business and to really look at some more qualitative aspects of your business, even though the quantitative things such as financial management, contracts with suppliers and customers are there. It's really important to understand what's at the core of your business and how things have changed. And so the three main things that we suggest people is to try to understand is first is to understand change. The second is to understand yourself, and then to understand your business, all within this context of things are changing and things will potentially be changed moving forward on a continual basis. So as we begin to understand change, one of the things that we're suggesting is to really put yourself in a mindset of yourself, how you yourself have changed in relation to this pandemic downturn. Then switch gears and then put yourself in the shoes of your own business, your suppliers, as well as your customers, and then really reflect on everything you've thought about. And one easy way to do this, to kind of make it formulaic for you, is using um, a design thinking, especially human design thinking principle that people utilize as a tool called rose thorn bud. And this is something that, permeates culture. Actually, we do this sometimes at the dinner table, and my 3-year-old daughter always wants to share her rose thorn bud. For the last month, her thorn has been the virus. The rose changes by day, and the bud is getting to see her grandparents at some time again. But if you look through or think through this rose thorn bud question and answer, it's helpful to do that in relation to yourself. So what was yourself, your business, your suppliers, and your customers before and after the pandemic? So what is something positive for you before the pandemic, something negative, and something that was promising or new opportunity? And really think through before and after the pandemic for each one of those groups: yourself, your business, your suppliers, and your consumers, to begin to understand the changes that have occurred. And as you think through this, it may be even valuable for you, if you just want to exercise your business mind, to think about other industries, to think about maybe a restaurant down the road if you're a hardware store, for instance. To start thinking about other businesses and how things may have actually changed for them, or how they may have actually, some businesses, things have improved. Now, as you do that, you need to also remember, and this is something that I think is vitally important to understanding how to move forward during this time, is that it's important, I think, to lead with empathy. And finding strength and vision through empathy is one of the most important concepts um, to keep in mind moving forward as our economy and society emerge from this shared challenge. I firmly believe, and I know others do as well, that business owners who practice empathy-focused thinking and keep themselves in a customer mindset during this hibernation mode during this time will be able to respond to changing market dynamics within and outside their business. If one isn't able to empathize with the marketplace and the individuals that make it up, and to really conceptualize and understand change, and to work back from that to reflect on your own business, it's going to be difficult to adjust your business moving forward. So some of the questions within that vein of thought to ask yourself at this moment is to ask yourself really how you yourself are doing. Are you taking care of yourself? And ask yourself how you've changed. Reflect for a while back on, why did you start your business? Was it because you had a dream? Was it out of necessity? Did you come up with an innovative idea and run with it? Or what value do you provide to your customers, and what do they do, or why do they do business with you? Essentially, why would they ever transact with you? What value do they get? And also then think about what values you feel your business represents. And within that, if your business was a person, what would that person be like? How would people describe that person? And thinking through this helps get you to a point of asking yourself whether or not you know what the core of your business is. Every business has a core. And at a core of business is essentially one thing that is defensively unique, and it's the thing that it's your last defense. As MIT's discipline entrepreneurship concepts put out, it's your last defense against the competition. It's that thing that's at the very heart and soul of your business. And understanding what that core is, if you don't already understand it, and looking at it with a critical eye, especially now, is really important. They say your core is really that heart and brain and even soul of your business, and it's what you use to outwit others and keep them going. And to get you to start understanding your core, the first thing that you need to understand is, and I've mentioned this several times, is what value does your business provide to customers? What is your actual value proposition? And there are many businesses that are finding themselves in this state that may have never even asked themselves that. And this is now the time to ask themselves and understand truly what your value proposition is. The second is to really look at all your assets and your business practices you have and start writing them down on paper, put them in an Excel spreadsheet, and categorize them for what makes you strong and what makes you weak, to really lay them out there and to see what your defense mechanisms are. And within that, as you start to categorize those, you should be able to whittle it down to one single core that you know truly defines your business and makes it defensively unique. And then you can categorize different layers of your core that protect that internal core against competition or to keep you going in business. And one of the ways to really finalize this thinking in your head is to put yourself in a position to imagine that you're looking to sell your business the highest amount possible to a buyer, or you're trying to pitch your business to an investor. Ask yourself how you would describe the way in which your business is defensively unique. What is at your core that defends against competition and makes you special? And what is your value proposition? It is vitally important to be able to have that elevator pitch and to understand what really is your business about and how it is valuable. So within that thought, and I wanted us to share this quote. If you're not familiar with the work of Joseph Campbell and you have, for some reason, a lot of time on your hands or even a little bit of time on your hands, and you're looking to think through marketing or other things at this time, his writing can be a very valuable resource. But if not, this one single quote, I think, can be helpful in getting people to remember. It's the idea of that people say that we're all seeking is a meaning for life. I don't think that's what we're really seeking. I think that what we're seeking is an experience of being alive, so that our life experiences on the purely physical plane will have resonances within our own innermost being and reality, so that we actually feel the rapture of being alive. This again is underpinning that question for yourself. Have you really been in a customer mindset? Do you understand the value that you're giving to customers? And do you understand the core basis of your business? And as you reflect on that, the question is, you would like to change? Are there things you would like to return to? Are there new market opportunities that you think that are there at the other end of this? Or do you think everything is perfectly fine with your business and you just need to flip some switches and turn it back on and things will be humming again? As you do that thinking, as I mentioned, those keys, your key suppliers and your key customers, and also that bail team are very key to your success. Fiddle with your keys. And the example I use for this is, remember what it was like to be young and to play around with keys. I remember I used to steal my parents' keys and try to do things, and finally they gave me a set of old keys, and those old keys could open up anything for me. They could open up an imaginary door. They could turn on an old farm truck that was halfway stuck in a river and allow me to drive to distant lands. Use your creativity and your imagination and fiddle with those keys and to see what they can unlock for you moving forward. And at the same time, is really know your value, both as an individual, as a business in the marketplace. And as you find your core, be empowered by that as you move through your phases of hibernation. Now, I just want to stop there. And part of this may seem a little bit unfinished. And part of this hibernation concept, this was what we say is the stage one of hibernation, is to really go through that, build that map to turn things on and off, and then to step back and start looking at your business in a much deeper manner than you may have. Having said that, I know there's a lot of people that are probably listening today. There's always ongoing conversations or questions about EIDL loans, the PPP program, what to do with employees, whether to furlough them, whether to put them on how you're going to handle unemployment. And one of those things that I can say today is to make sure to go to official resources. So the first link on the above is sba.gov. That should be your go-to point as official resources for any federal government assistance programs that are by SBA. That second link is to the Montana Department of Labor. The third is to the SBDC centers in Montana that help you find the center that's close to you. The fourth are the FADC centers, such as what I work with. And then the final is our website at growgreatfalls.org. If you want to go to our website at growgreatfalls.org, that's where we house. If you go just to our main website, you can click into our COVID-19, then include this business hibernation toolkit that we've talked about, as well as our business toolkits. We have a new resiliency guide, and we're posting information on that website on a continuous basis. But again, always go to trusted resources, and remember that the official federal and state government agencies that are overseeing things are the most trusted resources at this time. So I guess I would go ahead and again remind that this was just a stage one conversation, but I'd open it up to any questions that anybody might have, because I kind of zoomed through that pretty quick.
Barnett, I'm looking at the questions here. I just wanted to go over where folks, your first question, where folks were calling in from: Bozeman, Helena, Cutbank, Livingston, Great Falls area, Gardner, Billings, Helena, Billings, Livingston. So just wanted to go over that with you. Posted a nice quote and mention of Old Keith to tie into the wrap up. Well done. Thank you. So please type any questions that you have, or if you want to raise your hand, that's a function here in WebEx. We can actually unmute you and you could ask your question live. So go ahead and either raise your hand and I'll monitor that and I can unmute you, or you can type your question into the chat box. Barnett, while folks are doing that, and I'm monitoring that, I see that Jason just posted the growgreatfallsmontana.org site with the disaster toolkit link. Is there anything you want to say in addition to what you've already said about that resource? Or
yeah, I would say that feel free. We, especially in regards to this hibernation concept, we do have a 13-page downloadable guide that's similar to some of the steps that we talked about, that's interactive, that you can begin working on. And one of our goals, whether it's Jason, president, and regional SBDC director, myself, Tyler Manzales, or Rich Gannon, all working on business coaching, we understand these tools are not going to fix everything. And what we're trying to do is provide some ideas, some thought processes, and some basic resources that can help businesses as well as other economic development organizations through these times. And having said that, we're here to answer any questions that companies have. You know, if they look at one of our tools and there's 10 different things in there and one of them fits for them, and they want to talk to us more in depth about how it is they use that tool or how it is they need to do forward thinking to get themselves out of that, we are here. It's the reason why there's federal government and state government resources that help pay our salaries, as well as private donors throughout the region that chip in as well. We're here to help. And that's one of the things that business owners should know in this time, that there are people that are willing to help. There are people that are willing to listen, and they should not feel alone.
Thanks. Again, encourage you all to either type your questions in the chat box or raise your hands and I'll unmute you. Again, going down the list here.
I'm curious, maybe I can ask if there's anybody on the conference today that is actually in hibernation mode or has considered going into hibernation mode.
Great, and I'll be monitoring that to see what responses come up. Don't see any responses yet. Again, feel free to raise your hand. It's a function here in WebEx. Or type in your responses.
I guess the other question is if anybody wants to share the greatest challenges that they feel that businesses in Montana are facing currently. Or if people have any other ideas or resources or questions we haven't answered that we can provide in the future.
And I don't see anything coming up. Barnett, A quiet audience today, but
Okay.
we'll assume that you've done your job by providing some great information. So we'll give folks just another moment. If anybody has any last questions, comments they'd like to make, again, feel free to type them in the chat box or raise your hand. Rich just posted any interesting examples of businesses pivoting out there. Any responses here?
And I guess that's
either.
one thing I would just add real quick in response to Rich's question about pivoting is that even if you're in hibernation mode and if you go through this process of, shutting down your physical assets and then understanding how to bring them up and you really put yourself into understanding how things are changed, you can find within this time a minimally viable product that you can actually produce even during hibernation mode. And so hibernation mode does not necessarily mean that you just completely shut everything off and you're not doing absolutely anything. But if you find yourself really reflecting on your business and really driving and moving forward with empathetic thinking, you will find that there may be something you can do today and something that's very minimally viable to put into the marketplace still could be there.
Well, we'll see if there's any last questions here. Questions or comments from anyone?
Hey, Paul, it's Jason. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, you're coming
Yeah, I
through
mean to Rich's question, since nobody's chiming in, I figured I'd share this. I mean, one of my clients that I've been working with and has earned some accolades throughout the state over the years. They decided almost immediately. It's a restaurant. Decided to almost immediately hibernate, and this was before we published Barnett's piece about hibernation, and they did a lot of this stuff and talked to some of their trusted advisors, including industry specific mentors. And what they decided to do was kind of take an assessment of all the things that they do well, all the things that they don't do well, take a real serious look about what product that are most profitable, and what they're going to do. They've been hibernating for about 2.5 weeks now, and next week they're going to relaunch. Basically, what they decided was to lean in to what they knew they did extremely well and was a product that was most profitable for them, and they're going to rebrand and relaunch with that. So I would say that's one of the most interesting examples and early adopters of this concept that these people have. They leaned right into it. They were like, you know what, we're not going to fiddle with this. We're gonna hibernate immediately, figure out what we do well, what we don't do well, and move forward based on what we know. And they're going to reopen with a minimum, like Barnett said, a minimum viable product. So that's one of the ones here in our area that I've seen really lean into this concept of hibernation.
That's a great example. Thanks, Jason, for sharing that with us. Does anyone else have any comments or questions that they'd like to share? Seeing none, Barnett, thanks again for the great information. Again, we'll get this posted on the website as soon as the recording is available. We will have a webinar next week, Friday at the same time, and we'll be marketing that via our listserv and also through the Jason and his networks as well. So if there's nothing else, Barnett, any last words from you?
No, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in today, and I hope that there's at least one thing that I might have said that can be slightly helpful for you. I hope, but I think if we remember that we're all in this together and that there are resources out there and nobody's alone, I think that we will make it through this time. Most definitely.
Wonderful. That's great. Thanks again, Barnett, for the great information, and for everyone for joining us today. We'll see you next week at our next small business webinar. Until then, please be well, be safe, and be positive, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.